All right, right. Let's get into this. Aliens, UFOs, disclosure. How we got here. How did we get here? We have all seen movies about aliens and stuff for decades. I mean, I grew up watching stuff like that. But for some reason, this particular movie by Steven Spielberg is causing a stir because there's supposed to be an announcement from the federal government that we are not alone in terms of extraterrestrial life. So this has been all the rage for months now. A lot of people are talking about this because it's supposed to be a real thing. So I want to talk about and begin a series on this. I posted yesterday. It's my first back video in some time. Let's talk about how we got here. How do we get to the point where right now, at this very moment, as of Tuesday, June 16th, this is a big deal. The movies, the stir, the documentaries, the different things that are happening. How do we get here? Now, let me just start by saying, one, some of you watch these videos and you do not share the Christian faith that I do. That's fine. You may comment because it's a free country. But listen, I don't know how we got to this point I'm about to say, right? We've gotten to a point in our society where we think if you disagree or dislike what someone says, it's a moral failure of that person. So for the sake of this video, I may have to agree to disagree with you if you have comments or want to insult or whatever because of what I'm saying. I just agree to disagree with you likely, and that's okay. All right, so let's talk about this. How do we get here? How do we get to the point where aliens, UFOs, UAPs, disclosure, how did this happen? We didn't just wake up one day and decide, oh, there's something out there and this movie is going to knock down all walls. There's a reason why we're here, and it's taken hundreds of years to get to this point. Hundreds of years. So let's talk about it. First things first, welcome to CNN. I'm your host, Kirk Kennedy. Let's go in. On this channel, we take no part in the unfruitful works of darkness, but expose them. Please like and subscribe to the channel. I don't post all the time, and so I'd be losing subscribers. So like and subscribe because it tells the algorithm I bang with this content. Even if you don't like it, still like and subscribe. It doesn't cost you nothing but a half a millisecond twitch of a finger over a thumb icon on the YouTube video. All right, let's get into this. How we got here. All right, this has taken us hundreds of years to get to this point. All right, so what I'm going to start with, I'm going to start with sort of how we got here as a society, dating back a couple hundred years and working our way up to the present. How do we get to the point where aliens and UFOs become like, how do we get to the point where people would rather believe that a creature from a far distant galaxy, right? How is that more believable than like Ezekiel 1, which describes the movement in graphic detail of the Navy pilots like David Grush and others who have testified, even the video footage that we've seen, the speed with no propulsion, they're not turning, a different thing. Ezekiel 1 describes that. Now, I'm not saying that they're the same thing. What I'm saying is the Bible has almost in graphic detail a 26-year document that predates the modern era. And people would rather believe, or do believe, that a distant civilization is come to Earth and has been sort of visiting us. How do we get to this point? All right, here's how it starts. Let's go back a couple hundred years to what we call the Age of Enlightenment, the Enlightenment period. All right, this was a critical time period in Western civilization, and not so much just because of that time period of sort of the late 17th century to the early 19th century. I don't know if you know this, but there were, when you look back in human history, there are time periods that are given names, like the Enlightenment period, then the Romanticism period, then the modern period, then the postmodern. Like these are given real names by people and are accepted widespread. All right. So in the Enlightenment period, there's something we need to know. And actually, there are two men who predate the Enlightenment period that laid the foundation for the way Western civilization would begin to think, that began the trajectory of how we got here. The first one you will probably know well. His name is René Descartes. He was a French philosopher and mathematician, and he is most famous for this phrase, je pense, donc je suis, right? Which means I think, therefore I am. He's the father of, considered the father of modern philosophy by many, or at least one of them, all right? So his idea, his philosophy was that because I think, then I exist, I am. Now, it's interesting. It's not clear if the I am portion of what he's talking about was I am like God in Exodus 3:14, when he tells Moses, I am, right? But René Descartes, the father of modern philosophy, says, I think, therefore I am. And all of a sudden now, it starts to resonate with people, and people start thinking, hey, reason and thinking is more important than faith, right? Faith and supernatural things in the Bible and religion, they start to become antiquated, and the ability to reason and think becomes the new reality. The modern philosophy. That's why he's called the father of modern philosophy. Je pense, donc je suis. I think, therefore I am. Yes, I took French because I thought I want to impress a woman when I get married, and she ended up being Latino. It didn't work out as I thought. The French wasn't as special as I thought. That's not the point of this video. All right, so the father of modern philosophy begins and starts to make us question, how much should we put in our thinking, in our reason, in our philosophy, in our understanding of things? And then another man comes, and his name is Francis Bacon. And he is an English philosopher, and he is the father of the scientific method. Now, this was huge. Let me say this real quick, because I'm not against science. I think science is amazing. I like science. We have science has taught us a lot of things. But what he did with the scientific method, he flipped the direction of reasoning, right? So the old way, sort of the Aristotle, started with a general principle, and it reasoned down to specifics. Bacon pushed the induction the other way. He starts with specific observations and builds to them a general conclusion, right? So what Francis Bacon introduces is evidence first, conclusion second. Test it, don't just think it, right? So his whole idea was distrust everything until you get to the point where you cannot distrust anymore. And he laid the blueprint down for, we have to have evidence, proof, not faith, proof. We need evidence. We need evidence. Now, he didn't say, to my knowledge, anything about God that disproves God, but what it did was it began a movement of thinkers where people started to look down on faith, scripture, and other religions to define sort of our existence in life. And now it started to become my own logic, my own truth, my own understanding. Now, here's the one thing I will say, sidebar. People say that, oh, modernism and postmodernism and philosophy. Man, listen, remember in John 19, where Pilate was before Jesus, and Jesus said, those who are with me are on the side of truth. What did Pilate say to him? What is truth? Right? So the question of truth is not a modern conception. Right? It's just like, what is truth? People want to know, what do you mean by truth? What does that mean? But this is what happened. Bacon and Descartes laid the foundation on which the Enlightenment was built on. And for the next, 100 and so years, almost 200 years or so, 130, it became a way people thought, and answers to questions like, why are we here? What is life about? What exists? Those became nothing, right? All right, next, how we got here. So you got the Enlightenment period. Shortly after that, towards the end of the Enlightenment period, is born a man by the name of Charles Darwin, an English naturalist, all right? Now, we know, many of us know about Charles Darwin. Charles Darwin writes a book called The Origin of Species in 1859. And that work put evolution by natural selection in front of the public. So you coming out of an age of enlightenment period where reason, my ability to think, evidence and testing, the scientific method, and then Darwin builds on that and says, hey, you know what? Again, because faith isn't really the center stage anymore. Sidebar, this is why if you study modern apologetics, right? Here's what happened to the church. Let me tell you what's happening to the church with the age of enlightenment and these things. Here's what was happening. The church started to develop apologetics because Christianity and faith in God was starting to become idiotic. You were like antiquated. You were not really intelligent if you were still holding on to faith when now we have scientific proof and we have evidence, these things, right? So what the church is, the church starts to make these kinds of apologetics, and you get these arguments like the cosmological, the teleological, the ontological arguments, evidences for God. Why is all that stuff happening? Because the church is responding, trying to convince people that, no, wait a minute, Christianity is actually a thought-provoking reason. There's reason why we believe. There's faith, but there's reason. And then we get all this Van Tillian apologetics, and all this apologetics comes out trying to prove Christianity is actually an intelligent way to see the world. That, depending on what you think, I don't know if that was the best decision, but it was what it was. There's some good apologetics that came out of it. All right, back to our regularly scheduled broadcast. Darwin releases The Origin of Species, and the core mechanism is natural selection. And it's basically that organisms vary, more are born than can survive, right? So there is no intelligent design, there's no creator. It's just that over time, certain traits that fit a particular narrative, they reproduce over a vast amount of time, and then those small advantages accumulate into a new species, right? So it's kind of like survival of the fittest. There's a lot of them, but only the strongest survive, and they continue to evolve, and they mature. And this is called evolution. This doesn't need a creator. It doesn't need anything to happen, right? Then if we get into abiogenesis, you probably don't care about that, all right? But this happens. All living things trace back to one or a few original forms. The tree of life, if you will, becomes the way all things exist. Now, this is important. This is important because if life establishes itself here by accident, just by a series of fortunate events that evolve over time, then the same process could happen anywhere else. Why should we think that in this vast galaxy that same process of evolution didn't happen somewhere else and didn't happen further along than us that could create a race or a species of people that are further along than how far we've evolved? So what if there's other planets and other people who have evolved further than we ever have been, because life doesn't need any real designer. It just needs to have a series of events that form into a point where the strongest of those atoms and protons and neutrons and all those things, they come together and they form, and life continues to evolve. It doesn't seem like a big deal, but it does become a very big deal. This is why back when evolution was trying to be pushed in schools, Christians back in the early 20th century were really fighting back against it, because they were basically saying, you're trying to let science replace God. And those arguments happened way back in the day. We won't get into all of that. Now, let me just say this also. I'm oversimplifying this. There's a lot more detail and a lot to this. I'm not trying to give you all of this stuff. I'm not doing 5-hour documentaries. I'm just trying to give you a sense of how we got here. And it wasn't just by accident. We didn't just wake up and become here. There are things that happened that led us to believe gradually over time that aliens and UFOs have to be possible, because these other things that we used to trust are no longer trustworthy. All right, so you get the age of enlightenment. I think, therefore I am, the scientific method. So it comes reason and philosophy, and now evidence, proof, testing. And if you can't test it and can't prove it, I don't want to hear it. This is where all the prove that God exists to me, but no one can prove that God doesn't exist. It's a crazy argument. It's a scientific method argument. It comes out of the Age of Enlightenment. Can you prove that God exists? Can you prove he does not? We'll look at all the evil in the world. We'll look at all the good in the world. You know, I mean, it just goes, it's a circular argument. However, all right, next on our list, how we got here. Mathematics, specifically astrophysicists. This is important. The most popular of those we'll say in a minute. But around 1820, about 1854, a German mathematician, his name was Bernard Riemann, okay? He proved you could do the real geometry, mathematics could exist in more than 3 dimensions. He proved this. Now, let me explain what I mean. Mathematicians, astrophysicists, they use equations to understand the world. They use equations to understand gravity and light and different things, right? And they can tell by equations if this equation does not fit, what we're tracking, the math isn't mathing literally, then they realize then these equations cannot fit in the dimension of the world that we live in. How do we describe the phenomenon that we're seeing, that we're measuring, if these equations don't fit? The equations need to fit. Otherwise, there may be another equation that needs to add. And each time an equation is added, it equals to a dimension. This is all real, I promise you. So Bernard Riemann started this, but he couldn't really do much with it. Then comes the most popular man that we're aware of, Albert Einstein. Albert Einstein comes out with the special relativity in 1905, and he fuses space and time into one fabric, right? Where Riemann saw them as different, he put space and time together, which is where we get the term the space-time continuum. This comes from Albert Einstein, all right? He does this in his sort of general relativity around 1915. This is where it gets crazy. He gave the mathematical equation for higher dimensional language before anyone knew what to do with it. And he was trying to figure out that the world that we see does not fit the equations that we have. So he created a 4th equation, which was time. Time was the 4th equation. So you got space, you have light, you have gravity, and you add time, and now he has this 4th dimension that he's working with. But Albert Einstein couldn't figure it out. He couldn't get all of it to fit because the math wasn't mathing. Even though he got a part of it, apparently he died frustrated, having not been able to finish the equation that Bernard Riemann started. After Albert Einstein comes a man named Theodore Kaluza. Well, he's not after. He's kind of the same, but Oscar Klein and Theodore Kaluza worked together. These are 2 different people who came with the same idea. It's called the Kaluza-Klein theory. Now, what they did was in 1919, they took Einstein's gravity equations, right? So Einstein was onto something. They took his equations and wrote them in 5 dimensions instead of 4. They thought, okay, it's not working with 4. Let's write it in 5. And here was the payoff. The equation for light, which is electromagnetism, right? That equation, it falls out as a byproduct. And all of a sudden, gravity and light turn out to be, according to their equation, the same thing, but only in a higher dimension, right? And this is what's important. If a dimension is basically, what it mean by dimension is this, a way that you can move, right? So like if I have a line, if I draw a line, you can only go on the line for, that's 1 dimension, all right? If I put it on a piece of paper, now you can go forward, back, but you're still stuck on a piece of paper, okay? That's 2 dimensions. Now you go 3-dimensional and you have our world. Well, 4, if you consider what Einstein said, 3-dimension, 4 dimensions, we can do a lot of things. We're not stuck to a piece of paper. I can go in different directions, right? So each dimension added mathematically creates a new way to move. So if we're 3-dimension, that's crazy. And we can do stuff. We can touch paper and draw on paper. If we're 3-dimensional, then you add a 4th dimension and a 5th dimension, then how do you move in that space? What does that look like, right? This is what they're establishing. They get this in 5th dimensions but it still doesn't explain fully until you get to 1984, the superstring theory. And this was essentially math that said the universe's smallest components only balance if you put them all in 10 dimensions. Now, let's be clear. Science has not proven that there are 10 dimensions, but what they have said was the math that describes the world and the universe only makes sense if you add 10 dimensions, which is 10 equations that equal this. So imagine if we're in a third dimension, imagine what the 10th dimension would be like. And imagine if you're a being that can live in that 10th dimension, how you would function when you come to the third dimension where we are. It would be crazy. You would be able to knock on over there, we'd hear it over there, and you'd be over here. And do you see what's happening? So you get the age of enlightenment, reason and mathematics, evidence. You get Darwinism, evolution, right? The survival of the fittest, the world survival. And then you get this mathematical equation that says the world that we see is not the only thing that exists because it needs to have at least 10 dimensions in order to fit all of the equations for them to fit rightly in the world to run. Now, if you're a Christian, here's what we know. We understand things like the heavens, different dimensions. We know that there's spiritual warfare. We know that there's other realms. We know that there are demons and angels and things that we cannot see with our eye. We see that in scripture. We've seen God pull back the curtain and show, like Elijah and them, that there were angels on chariots and ready to fight for them, and they couldn't see them in the natural world. So we understand this. Science is saying there is a world that we cannot see. And when you consider the evolutionary arguments and other things, and it's like, well, why couldn't these beings come from a different dimension, which would explain why they have technology and things that we can't fathom, and they've evolved beyond us. This is how we get here. This is it. Then you get to now the disclosure era. The disclosure era is stuff like Roswell, 1947. There was some wreckage recovered in New Mexico. I know you heard about this. The military said it was a weather balloon, but it was later classified as Project Mogul. And this was the event that launched the modern UFO sort of age, with credible witness testimony that still contradicts the official story. So you get Roswell, right? That's 1947. It shows up, and even now people still talk about Roswell, right? Then you get Project Blue Book, which is 1952 to 19. This is an official Air Force investigation, and they logged, listen to this, they logged 12,618 cases, but only out of all of those, 701 unexplained cases they couldn't solve. In other words, they watched 12,618 sort of movements in the air, flying objects, and 701 of those 12,618, they could not explain what it was. They could not explain it. And that was a big deal. They couldn't explain it. Then you get Area 51, right? Area 51 is probably the most famous out of all of them, classified Nevada site. The government didn't even acknowledge completely its existence until 2013. It was all speculation. It was just people making money from, go by there and you can buy stuff. But people said they saw things there. And then finally in 2013, the government acknowledges it. Keep in mind that David Grush, a retired Navy officer, has testified before Congress on multiple occasions that he has seen things and known about things that exist in Area 51. Right? This is the reality. This is what's happening in the world. So we're getting these disclosure events that are happening over time. And now at this point, I say in 2017, the New York Times published, it was a leaked Navy cockpit footage. I think this was it was the gimbal video, the Tic Tac video, the one that showed the video go like the thing go like this, zoom, 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 and was gone. And they were like, oh my gosh, they couldn't believe it. That was the first time they started publishing it. And now, we're getting these videos. Last year, David Farah put out a documentary called The Age of Disclosure, which is a really crazy documentary. I mean, it's on Amazon Prime. I bought it, watched it, and it was I mean, you can't deny what they're seeing. The matter is, what is it that they're seeing is the question, not are they seeing anything. It's pretty clear. If you watch that documentary, you'll at least know there are people with credibility that really believe this and are marching in this direction. You cannot deny that. What they believe, we don't have to share their conclusions, but we cannot deny their observations. Watch The Age of Disclosure. It's on Amazon Prime. But this gets happened. This starting to happen now. This disclosure is happening, and now congressional hearings, and now we're getting these declassified videos, which people in the know, people in that Age of Disclosure documentary are saying it's going to get way worse. There's stuff that David Grush, I saw today on a Fox News interview, he said that the government's holding the keys to the car. All they have to do is just let it go, and everyone will see it and be able to judge for themselves. That's what he's saying. So this is what's happening. You got the Age of Enlightenment. You got Darwinism. You have astrophysicists, and then you have these things happening in the culture. And then lastly, and probably the most effective, is entertainment. Entertainment. And the things that entertain us disciples, there have been movies about UFOs for decades, since Roswell. UFO movies, all of it. There have been incredible television shows. I mean, some of my favorite movies are MCU, Marvel Cinematic Universe, where these beings, some beings come from a different planet, like Superman and others, Thor. You have beings that Superman's not Marvel, that's MCU. I understand that. So don't jump down my neck. I understand. I know it's DC. But my point is that we've been trained for years to either see alien life forms as either these aggressive things that we have to fight and kill because they're trying to kill us, like plenty of movies. Independence Day with Will Smith. Remember when he punches the alien back down? That alien with that big old head got punched by Will Smith back down. Nah, fam. You'd have ran like I don't know what if you'd have seen that joint come out. But I digress, right? You get that stuff. You get that. We got to destroy them, like The Edge of Tomorrow, one of my favorite Tom Cruise movies with him and Emily Blunt. Incredible sci-fi film. You get those movies. But then you get the other side, these benevolent beings like E.T., Close Encounters of the Third Time. Ironically, Steven Spielberg did both of those. You get these kinds of movies that come with a different message. These are benevolent beings that actually established who we are. They created the pyramids and they answer the Stonehenge and they know all these things, right? So we've been entertained for decades to believe in both, that one, just that they exist, that something's out there, and it's any day now, and either they're benevolent or they're evil, right? This is what's happened. This is how we got here. So the Enlightenment said, I only can measure what I see is real. Darwinism said life makes itself, so the cosmos is full of life making itself. The physicists said there are dimensions we can't see, room for beings we can't perceive. The government said there's something out there and it's real. And Hollywood said they're greater than you. And now we have to decide to fear them or to follow them. This is how we got here in society. And the whole time, no one is outwardly saying it, but faith, Christianity, and so forth, it gets bumped down and down and down and down to now the Bible is just like the last resort for most people. And sadly, even some Christians are more tapped into what's being said through the alien stuff than what the Bible is saying. Just one thought. Here's one thing the Bible does say. I said this in my video yesterday. Paul said this in Galatians 1. But if even an angel from heaven, or we should preach to you a gospel contrary to the one we preach to you, let him be accursed. Said even so, this is what they call these beings. They either call them aliens, extraterrestrials. Some people are now calling them interdimensional beings, right? If we think about what an angel is, separate like it's what its position is. An angel is actually a job description. It's not like even Elohim. Elohim just means a spirit being. It's not a name. It's not a formal name. Angels are not a formal name. They're a description, but we call them angels, right? Just like that. Satan means, in Job it calls it the Satan, like the adversary, right? But it became a formal name in the New Testament. Angels is really a formal name. They actually have names like Gabriel, Michael, and so forth, right? But they're just interdimensional beings that are powerful, more powerful than us, and that are allowed to move in and out of our quote unquote dimension. So that we know exists. But the culture says it could be these other things. And there's more to be said about that. All right. So I just wanted to give you just sort of how we got here. You can agree or disagree. I'm just telling you how I've seen us get to this point. More could be said, but it will not be said on this video. But oh boy, we're going to go on a journey. I said I needed a really good reason to get back on YouTube because I just been going through a lot. There's a lot happening. I got a good reason. So I will see you at the next video. Stay tuned, like and subscribe to the channel, or don't. I get it. But you should, though. Give your boy some love, man. I should be at 5K subscribers by now. I've been stuck around 4,300. But then again, I don't post but like once every 2 months. But I'm back to back. All right? See you next video.